boys and girls, welcome back again to another series of I Didn't Know That About Wyoming. This is Story Time with Mr. Dennis, and I have my friend Aubrey with me today. We're going to tell a story that many of you probably have never even heard. In fact, I find that very few people in Wyoming even know about this group of people that we're going to talk about. Now, Aubrey, I have to ask you a question. Do you like ghost stories?
Well, some people do, but some people don't because it's very creepy for them.
Oh, do you think if I tell you a kind of a ghost story that you will be okay?
Sure.
All right, well, let's try. This story actually is handed down from the Shoshones and the Arapahoes, although I did some research and found out that many of the North American tribes also tell similar stories very close to the story that I'm going to tell you today. It so seemed that once the sheep eaters, the early ancestors of the Shoshones, began to dwindle out, that the Shoshones came into the valley of the Wind River. And as the Shoshones came into the valley of the Wind River, they would find that sometimes at night they would get very scared. Because as they would be walking along, they would see the grass begin to move in front of them. Now, at first they thought it was the wind. But just as they be walking, all of a sudden, it was as if a little person had a tiny bow, and they would take the bow and they would shoot the person walking, and it would hit them right in the ankle or the leg. Now, it seemed that on the end of their arrows was poison. And that poison would automatically make the person really, really sick, or sometimes that person would die. They began to believe that the area in which they lived was possessed with what they called little people, or they're called Nanumis. Now the Nanumis would hide during the day and only come out at night.
Mr.
And
Dennis,
yes.
can you tell us why they hide in the morning?
That is a very good question. The reason they hid in the morning was because they could not take the light. The light would make them kind of shrivel away. And so they only came out at night. In fact, the old grandmas and moms in the tribes sometimes would stay up all night long and peel potatoes or apples just to keep busy, because these little Nanumis like to creep into the house, and sometimes they grab the little children, take them away, and make slaves out of them, and make them work for them, because they were bigger and stronger. And it seemed like the chief of the tribe decided he wanted to get rid of these little people. So you know
Mr.
what?
Dennis,
Yes.
why did he want to get rid of the little people?
Why did he want to get rid of them?
Yeah.
He wanted to get rid of them because they were dangerous. And he didn't want his people to be afraid anymore. So he went and he prayed to Great Grandfather, or the Great Spirit. And you know what the Great Spirit told him? The Great Spirit said, if you want to get rid of the little people, paint your faces all white, just as white as this ball. Okay? And then he says, take the women and children and men and take clubs and go through the grass and scare the little people, and they will be chased into a forest, and they'll climb the tall trees. And when they climb the tall trees, light a fire and burn them. And that will get rid of the little people, and you don't have to worry about them anymore. So, that's exactly what the chief did. He had all
Mr. Dennis,
Yes.
why do they talk to the spirit to know what to do?
Well, just like we talk to Heavenly Father to know what to do. And so, They did exactly what the Great Spirit asked them to do. They painted their faces all white. They got clubs and they went through the grass. The little people scurried ahead of them and they climbed these big pine trees. And actually, this took place just outside of Casper. And there, they lit a fire. The pine trees went up.
Mr. Dennis.
Just a second. And they heard the little people crying. And he knew then that he had rid the country of the little Nanumis and they didn't have to worry about them anymore. Now, you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was kind of rude for them to do that. They should just ask the Spirit to help them make friends.
Well,
so they don't hurt them anymore.
I think they tried that and it didn't work. But this is the story of the Nanumis that might surprise you. It seemed that several years later, in the 1860s, there was a sheep herder.
What's a sheep herder?
Like your grandpa who takes care of sheep.
Oh, yeah.
And they took these sheep herders, and this sheep herder was looking in a cave, and you know what he found?
What?
He found a mummified creature just like you see on the slides. And that mummified creature was the size of a boot box.
Oh.
And he was over 60 years old. And so he was only about that big and 60 years old, but he was mummified. And then...
Mr. Dennis,
yes.
What does mummified mean?
Good question. Mummified means that he had not decayed, that he was preserved. And do you want to see a picture of him?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's show it to them.
Looks just like that. And the rest of the group is looking at the picture right now. It's on the film. And so he took this mummified person into his sheep herder's wagon and went to sleep.
Why did he put him in his wagon?
Because he thought it was a really interesting find. But when he woke up in the morning, guess what?
He was gone.
The little person had caused an evil thing to happen, and his sheep had died, his horse had died, his dog had died, and the little sheep herder became so frightened that he took the mummified creature, put it back into the cave, and left. Well, that mummified creature remained in the cave until 1926.
Why is he very evil though?
They say that these little people carry bad spirits. And so in 1926, there was a miner, and he was looking for minerals in the rocks. And all of a sudden, guess what he found?
What?
The mummified creature. And he took a picture of it, and that's why we have a picture of it today. And he knew a friend in California who was an archaeologist. So he decided to take the mummified creature and travel to California and see if his friend could help him find out a little bit more about it.
What does
I bet you didn't
do?
know. Well, I bet you didn't know about this in Wyoming. That miner left Wyoming and headed for California and has never been seen since.
Why hasn't he been
Or
seen?
has the mummified creature person that he found. They totally disappeared. Now, one thing we do know about these Nanumis and these little people is that the University of Wyoming, they have several skulls or heads that remain of these little people.
Mr. Dennis.
Yes.
Why did their little heads or skulls remain?
That is an excellent question, and let me explain why. Because they found that these Numies were cannibalistic. And so as they would die, they would eat the bodies of those who had died, cut off the head, and leave the head, so only the heads of these little people are found. Now, today, they say that these little people still live. Now, I don't know whether this is true or not, but this is what was told to Mr. Dennis. I was teaching on the Wind River Reservation several years ago. And a lady came and spoke to me, and I was telling the story of the little people, or the Numies.
Why did
And
she
guess
say-
what?
What?
She said, let me tell you what happened last weekend.
Oh,
You want to know what happened?
yeah. What's that?
Her and her husband and friends had been up in the Wind River Mountain hunting. And all of a sudden, her husband and her friend came running back because they said they had seen little people. And they were scared. And they left. Now, where they were is a place called Paradise Valley, up in the Wind River Mountains. And they say
Yes.
that in the Wind River Mountains, in the Paradise Valley, are little huts and little homes where these little people still live.
Mr. Dennis.
Yes,
But why do they still live?
we don't know that. But this much I do know. When you go to sleep at night, and if you hear a noise, be careful, because it might be a Nanumi. Thank you for being with us today. And that story, or that legend, like I said, has been handed down by many of the Native American tribes. And in fact, there are many of the members of the tribes today who still feel that the spirits of these little Nanumis, who supposedly had once been consumed in the fire by Casper, are still dwelling on the reservation today. Whether that be true or not, who knows? It's one of the mysteries of, I didn't know that, about Wyoming. Thank you.